Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us today with our new COVID-19 studio. Today, my guest is Joe Fisher. He's the founder of Thornhill Medical, who, if you might have heard, that they have just received recognition, to say the least, from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and the Federal Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, Navdeep Bains. Thornhill Medical is going to be delivering 500 mobile compact ventilator systems to help Canada's response to fight COVID-19. Now, Joe, thanks for joining us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Joe, can you give us a bit of history about Thornhill Medical?
Sure. Thornhill Medical has been around since about 2004. I'm an anesthesiologist at the University Health Network, and I'm also a little bit of a scientist and tinkerer and this and that. And so we had some technology that we were developing that we ended up getting some IP on. And when we wanted to commercialize this type of stuff, the hospital suggested that we incorporate a separate company and basically commercialize the IP through the company rather than through the University Health Network. So they more or less spun us off into our own company, and that turned out to be Thornhill Research, which is now Thornhill Medical.
I see. And how fast will you be able to deliver 500 of these ventilators to the government, to government facilities?
I think we can do it pretty quickly. Usually, when we need to do something, there are all sorts of cumbersome hurdles in the way. There's paperwork and this and that and the other. All that is being dispensed with. Like things now happen literally overnight, and those end up, believe it or not, being the limiting factor. So, as long as we can get the components, which we're looking into now, we can ramp up and produce them very quickly. In fact, some are going out probably next week.
Fantastic. How much does one of these units cost for a medical facility to buy generally?
First of all, I need to take one step back to something that you said previously, and that this is not a ventilator. You can buy a ventilator for, an improvised one, this and that, for very little money. This is a complete life support system. This was designed to be a portable, complete life support system for very sick patients, which are basically injured soldiers or people that have been injured in disasters, and is to provide a complete life support system, such as, for example, exists in the ICU. Mm-hmm. If you come to the Toronto General, I'll take you up to the ICU. You'll see one of these ICU beds, ICU rooms, and you'll see all the equipment that you see there. That's inside this device. So calling it a ventilator is like calling a Mercedes a motor.
Okay, well, I stand corrected.
It costs more than the motor. So it's. I don't think that the actual cost in dollars will provide you with a perspective, particularly if you compare it to just a ventilator, which you can get for anything from $100 to $60,000.
Right. Okay. So interesting. Then what are all the functions that this device can handle that are similar to what's in the ICU?
That's a good question. So basically, this device, first of all, it has, for what it does have a ventilator. It does provide complete ICU ventilator function. But ventilators need several things. They need power. They need a source of oxygen and so forth. This device provides its own power. It works off batteries and can work off batteries for 6 to 10 hours. And it provides its own oxygen. It doesn't need any external oxygen. We're reading now that some places are actually running out of oxygen, which isn't surprising in a large disaster. This device is completely self-contained and takes the oxygen out of the air. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that patients who are very sick, it's not just their lungs that are sick. They have multi-organ disease, multi-organ failure. Their hearts are sick, their livers are sick, other things. And they need to be monitored very extensively. And this requires, for each type of monitoring, requires a standalone device. We've incorporated all of that into this device. So in this box that you can literally carry, weighs about 36 pounds or clip onto the stretcher, you've got all the monitors that you have in the ICU. You've got the power, which you wouldn't have elsewhere, but you have here. And you've got all the oxygen that you need, which you don't need to pipe into the ICU. So you're completely self-contained and autonomous.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then if is this something that an individual could buy on like eBay or Amazon if they wanted to?
I'm not sure that they can buy it on Amazon, but I don't know what they would do with it.
Right. Right.
I don't think that they can do anything with it.
Sure. Okay. So according to a site that's tracking the COVID-19 virus in Canada, as of this moment, we have 9,800 or 489 cases. That's up 877 today so far. Of those, of the 877, 62 are already serious. So could you produce enough of these machines that could essentially service all of the intensive care requirements of let's say, the United States, for example?
Okay, so let me tell you that what is required goes into two stages. So the initial stage, every society has intensive care unit beds. I believe there's about 115,000 intensive care unit beds in North America, including Canada and the United States. So that's your first line. So people who get sick, they're treated. If they require critical care, they're treated in the standing critical care units. Where you run into a problem is when all those are full. This is why people are panicking, because once these are full and you have additional patients who require critical care, just the ventilator, as I told you at the beginning of this talk, is insufficient. You need a complete suite of the intensive care. So when the patients are sitting in the cafeteria of the hospital or on a tent outside or in a newly built facility or in your stadium, you don't have all that stuff in the intensive care unit, and you cannot provide critical care to all those patients without a device such as this.
What is the total production capacity of Thornhill Medical in the span of 1 year, assuming that this virus continues to intensify and the number of serious cases requiring critical care start to exceed the number of beds available in North America?
Okay, so from the Thornhill point of view, we've partnered up with people who have a very large reserve of industrial capacity. And the other limiting factor, the only other limiting factor is obtaining all the components, getting our pieces that we need together. And if we have those, I don't think that there is a large limiting factor. I think these things can be ramped, especially as I said before, now where everybody's cooperating, where the government and everybody else is cooperating. We can ramp up these things very quickly.
Sure. So then does that imply that the government is actually going to pay for all of these units?
I hope that they pay for the ones they've ordered.
Right. So my question is, from the standpoint of Thornhill Medical, is it a company that will be seeking external investment to help it service the demand that's evolving as a result of COVID-19?
Okay, I'm not really the guy to speak to that. I think the CEOs and the executives speak to that. But we're a multifaceted company. This is just one of our products. So our aim has been to produce things that nobody else produces. There's nothing that we do that you can find elsewhere on in some advertisement or anything else. So the things we produce are unique, and sometimes we need some investment and things like that to look after those and develop those to the point where they become commercial and so forth.
Right. Okay. I was really impressed because Thornhill Medical is not, it's not a very well-known company. outside of medical circles, I'm sure. But when I started to look into it, I mean, your depth of research talent and the stuff that you guys have created is like in demand around the world, and you're sort of the leading edge of a lot of technologies in that regard. This portable ICU unit is a case in point. It's not like you can choose from a full range of these things elsewhere in the world. How did you come up with the idea for this?
Interestingly enough, I didn't come up with the idea for it. I don't think anybody came up with the idea. It was one of those things that sort of, evolved over time. So I developed some means of being very efficient with the use of oxygen. I'm going to make this very short. So it appealed to the United States military, the United States Marine Corps in particular. They wanted to apply this type of technology in the field. They hired us to make certain equipment, and then something happened called feature creep. If you're not, those listeners that are not familiar with feature creep, you make them what they want, and then they ask, this is great, can you do this?
Right.
Well, yeah, if you want to sponsor that, sure, we could do that. So we do that. And then they wanted a ventilator, and then they wanted this, then they wanted it smaller, and this and that and the other. And they were non-compromising. They wanted the best of everything, the highest quality, the best performance. It had to be able to be dropped and watered and frozen and heated and all this and that. And then in the end, we ended up with this device. And then along came COVID-19, and the rest is history.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, so if there was an individual who wanted to distribute some of these devices to ambulatory hospitals that have been set up, and they wanted to donate them, how would they go about acquiring these units to achieve that?
Well, I think that they should phone Leslie Gouldy, who's our CEO.
Okay.
And she will direct them to the correct person.
Okay.
To make those arrangements. Sure, we'd be happy to do that.
You bet. Great. Joe, that's very interesting. I really appreciate your time today. Thanks so much for joining me.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for your interest in us.
You bet. Bye for now.
Bye.